Welcome to the Elephant TV. My name is Abdullahi, and our guest today is Salah. Salah is from northern Kenya. He's written a lot of stuff about the North, identity, Shifta War, and citizenship. Salah, welcome to the Elephant.
Thank you very much, Abdullahi.
Yeah, Salah, I wanted to start with you about identity. Kenyan Somalis' identity and citizenship is closely tied. The Kenyan Somalis have been called all manner of names. During the independence they were called shifters. After that they were aliens, and now most of the time they are called terrorists. Can you contextualize for us this evolution, Salah?
I think the terms have been changing, but they refer to the same thing, just being lawless, just being different, and just being a threat to the peace in the country. So, I think the Kenyan officials, the government, and people who are near the government, and generally the populace, because of the government and the media's reference to these terms, became sort of alienated from the region. They initially, in history, they have never visited before 1960s, after independence. The African leaders who were fighting for the independence never visited northern Kenya. Northern Kenya was a closed region. So referring them to being alien, to being shifters, to being different from the population was part of the narrative that we inherited from the British. Because the shifter itself came about in 1963 when the region rejected to be part of Kenya. They wanted secession and to join Somalia. And if you look at it, shifter means somebody who is what? Who is a bandit. Shifter, I think, is an Tigrian language, and it means actually rebels and bandits. And by giving them this name, they were trying to delegitimize the secession war, the secession struggle. And then that actually came to pass. In 1967, there was some sort of agreement between Kenya and Somalia on the region. By the way, there was no sort of agreement between northern Kenya people and Kenya. And it was northern Kenya people who wanted, the NFD people who wanted to be part of Somalia or have their own state. So there was no agreement with them. The agreement was with Somalia, which was a state which wanted to regain that region. So after that, there was no shifter. There was no people who were fighting for secession. The secession war ended. Then things like poachers came about, because at that time, poaching was a very big business. After 1967, 1968, up to 1970s, poaching was a very big business. And probably because of the fact that the region had a lot of guns, which were used for the secession war, then naturally the foot soldiers of the poaching were people from the north. But the people who were actually benefiting were people from down Kenya, the people who were in government, people who were actually supposed to be protecting the game that was being killed in the parks. So yeah, and slowly things turned into aliens and people who are from outside the country, refugees, and that happened in 1978 after Somalia was defeated, in the Somali-Ethiopian War, and then refugees came to Kenya for the first time, and most of these refugees were people who left Kenya anyway at the time of the secession war. So now refugees became an issue, even way before Somalia fell apart, way before the first refugees came. If you look at history, in the 1970s, there were raids in Isli, flashing out refugees. People are thinking that this refugee issue was just about after 1992. No, it was there in 1970s, 1980s. If you remember the massacres, part of the massacres was this idea that there were people who have allegiance to Somalia. And I used to hear that Somalia itself had an issue, had a hand in specifically the Wagala massacre. But that is actually now recorded, and you look at the official government records of that time, you will see Somalia had a hand. There was a rebel movement which was in Ethiopia, which the people of Wajir, the leaders of that rebel movement were from actually Wajir. So if you look at it, you see these things are changing like a chameleon. Every time the environment changes, the term that we're being referred to changes. Then after poachers, aliens, refugees, now it is a shifter. And then you see, the unfortunate thing in this case is there's a sort of coincidence that these changing narratives have relation to the environment within these people are living and the neighborhood. The emergence of Al-Shabaab and other groups because of the war in Somalia, this brought about the issue of now Al-Shabaab and terrorists. So now we are at Al-Shabaab, but I'm sure if the Somalia situation changes and the current issue of terrorism comes to a halt or comes to an end, then we'll have a new term for the population. The only fear I have is this is leading somewhere. People who are called by names, people who are branded, in the end actually might suffer worse consequences than just branding.
Thank you, Salah. But along this evolution, there are other interesting conversation where people say, why are you guys complaining? You've got high-profile leaders in the government. You can't be marginalized. Aden Duale until recently was the leader of the majority in parliament. Somali businesses are occasionally accused of taking certain industries. Now in CBD, Somali restaurants, in transport business, how do these two things, go hand in hand? Where on one side, these people since independence, because they didn't want to be part of the, the country, were looked at differently. But now you have these people who, have been put in places of power within the political system and in business. How do these two things, go hand in hand?
I think the issue of inclusion in politics began after the coup, 1982, is when actually Northern people were actually brought into the government, not because they were wanted in government, but because of some sort of payback for helping Moi come back to power after he was actually overthrown by the military. And then what happened was, you see, you look at Northern Kenya, the kind of corruption that happens there is much more than what happens in the rest of the country. And to sustain yourself as a leader in Northern Kenya, you need to be near power. You need to be at the center of things so that you can get the resources, so that you can actually corrupt the whole system and the people. So when you look at people who are close to the government, they're not there because they are serving the population. They're there because they are perpetuating their own power. If you look at Northern Kenya, the inclusion in government is not, it's not perpendicular to, or it's not even related to in any way to the level of development in the region. You'll see the region is highly underdeveloped. You look at everywhere, you think that these people have been left in the 1960s, but yet you look at the national power structure, you find them there, they're all over the place. So how that happened, I think, has historical context. And you look at, you read the history and you see that, yes, these people were left, in their own devices. What happened is most of the people who are educated, most people who have opportunities do not live in Northern Kenya anymore. Yeah, they live in Nairobi, they live in other cities in Kenya. These people who are close to power are not actually living in Northern Kenya. They're not from there anymore. They're elected from there, but they're not from there anymore. So you look at, like you say, that you have just named one of the more vocal politicians. Yes, but if you look at Garissa, the river Tana passes through the town, but the town has never had clean water since independence. So there is no relationship between the closeness to power of some of our politicians, to the actual development on the ground. I think when I explain this, I explain in some sort of tokenism. It's not actually being close to power. It's being it's called what? Being rewarded for loyalty, individual loyalty, being given some benefits because you are actually helping those in power in a certain way. What is happening is Northern Kenya is there to actually make the government structure look good, not necessarily to actually help itself in terms of development or actual participation in the country, in the government.
Absolutely. Yeah, and then one of the things that, if there's any consequential event that happened, since independence is the 2010 Constitution. Many in the North regard that as a time when, Kenya cared, resources came. And one of the things that has generated is, people from elsewhere complaining about, oh no, Somalis or people from Northern Kenya benefiting disproportionately, right? You've had, 1 vote, 1 shilling, 1 kilometer and stuff. Is this, a correct assessment? Why is equity generating such a tremendous amount of resistance from, people from elsewhere, people like Moses Kuria, if you will?
I think they have to look at what happened between 1963 and 1992. The entire budget for Northeastern, the 3 counties, there used to be 3 districts, between 1963 and 1992 was 180 million, and most of it was spent on security. So, you look at that, and they are telling us from 1963 you have been benefiting from the government. You have been using the resources. Your roads are paved. You have hospitals. You have schools. You have facilities. The government is near you. You can actually drive to Nairobi from your house and actually go home for lunch. And then you are telling us that we were benefiting disproportionately. No, we're not. Actually, we are not. Even with that, even with the allocation in terms of devolution money, in terms of what is it called? This fund, which is supposed to stabilize the
equalization fund. The equalization
fund. In terms of that, even with that, we still want more because we have been left out for over 40 years. You have been benefiting. So why don't we have the shares that were not given to us in the last 40 years? So I think it is sort of political, language. It's not necessarily what facts, and it's not necessarily supported by history. It's not supported by development. It's not supported by any parameter. You look at just look at things like literacy. I think 2007 there was a Kenyan National Literacy Survey which came up with a figure of 92% of people from Wajir, Mandera, and Garissa are illiterate. These people who are living there. So I was looking at, what are you telling us? People who have been going to school since 1940s. You're telling us only 8% have gone to be able to read. No, the problem is anybody who has education or opportunity does not live in Northern Kenya anymore because there's nothing for you there. Myself, I don't live there. I like the place. I talk for it most of the time, but I don't live there. And one of the things I've been telling people from Northern Kenya is Kenya is a country with few rights, and one of them is the right to settle wherever you want. So nobody is forcing you to live in Chalbi Desert. You can come and live in Thika. You can actually buy ranches in all over the place. So the idea that Somalis are coming to disproportionately take over some businesses or benefit from allocation of government, that I think is a bit exaggerated. This is Kenya. Anybody can live wherever they want. If somebody has found an opportunity in restaurants in CBD, everybody can see the opportunity. There are lots of people in CBD, they need to eat. If I can provide food, what is the problem? So I think we need to broaden our mind much more than that. And in fact, if you look at Kenya, they forced the people of not NFD to be part of Kenya. In fact, there was a war fought on that idea that you should be part of Kenya, regardless of what you want. The idea of self-determination was thrown out of the window at the time. So I'm telling people, okay, you don't like us, you don't want us to have the identity, you don't want us to do the business, you don't want us in government, you don't want allocation for us in devolution, yet you fought with us to be members of
forced marriage. It's a forced marriage. Yes.
So I think it doesn't make any sense. I think what probably people of the North in NFD, former NFD, should be thinking like this. Okay, Kenya has a lot of opportunities. It is actually even livestock that we rear. It's some of the parts of Kenya which have huge ranches, can do better than Northern Kenya. So if you find yourself if you find yourself in Northern Kenya, it's very difficult for you. Go and live somewhere else in Kenya. Kenya is a very big place.
It can accommodate all of us.
I was also telling them,
yes,
if you're building the SGR, we will come and have small towns along the route of the SGR, and we'll populate all those towns.
Absolutely.
And you look at the Thika highway,
yes.
Now in Thika, parts
yes.
of Thika called Mungeni,
yes.
There are a lot of people from Northern Kenya living there.
Yes.
The reason, development is there. So we follow the development that's happening in this country. And because this is one country, anybody can live wherever they want, and anybody can do the business wherever they want. And that is the mentality that should be promoted by everyone in Kenya. Nobody is taking opportunity from anybody else. Anybody who's doing business, anybody who is opening up opportunities for the rest of us, I think should be encouraged, not condemned.
Absolutely. And one of the things that, you've been very closely involved in, documenting some of the egregious human rights violations in the North, particularly the Wagala massacre. What are avenues that some of these historical and contemporary injustices, what are the avenues for them to be resolved, be it formal, be it informal? We had the TJRC, the report has not been tabled in the parliament as of yet. What are the opportunities to resolving this? Because we cannot just sweep them under the rug. People die, people talk a lot about poverty in Northern Kenya, but during all these massacres, livestock in their hundreds were killed, taken away, and people were completely pauperized. How can this be resolved? What are your thoughts about addressing some of these injustices?
I think we had opportunity in the early years of Kibaki, President Kibaki, to actually come clean and resolve these issues. But our politics is such a cynical type of politics that it's very hard to resolve anything. There was the TGRC, and the TGRC came up with specific recommendations. And those recommendations included what? Included the recommendation of some people who were banned from holding public office. There was recommendations on reparations. There was recommendation on official apology from government. What happened was actually the president, sort of, sidestepped the TGRC process, and on his own, said, apologized for what happened in Northern Kenya and other parts of Kenya for the last 5 decades or so, and he established a fund of 10 billion at the time. Actually, he ordered it to be established, a fund of 10 billion for reparation purposes, and asked, I think, the Office of the Attorney General or the Judiciary to come up with a process of, putting up the mechanism of actually claiming against that fund. I think at some time in 2018, I think there was about 3.4 billion which was allocated for that purpose. But the process, the guidelines are yet to be actually made public, are yet to be agreed upon, and Parliament seems to have slept on its job. Parliament is supposed to be the one driving this kind of processes. So the TGRC report, very nice report. I have a very big copy here, the relevant copy. You look at that, TGRC.
Yes.
I think that it is volume 2A, the one that actually talks about Shifta War and other massacres. So I think the best way now to go forward is for Parliament to actually, adopt the process, the TGRC process, and for the government to now implement its recommendations. Yes, some of the perpetrators have died. Some of the people who actually did this are no longer with us. This is like 38 years ago. Bagala was 38 years ago. But the post-election violence of 2008 is not that that old. It's a recent happening. Things are happening up to now. If you look at the extrajudicial killings that are happening, so this is a continuous thing. The massacres are happening. The killings are continuing. So some of the things that we need to address is, if we address the earlier ones, probably we can come up with a mechanism for addressing the current, the ones that are ongoing. So if there is a consequence for committing crimes against Kenyans, then there will be no crimes against Kenyans in the future, or they will be reduced at least in a scope. So I think we need to adopt the TGRC process. The Parliament should now come up with a mechanism for for implementing it, and the government should implement it. That should be the best route. Otherwise, we can continue ignoring it, and things just continue happening. People are not held accountable for their actions, and we will have a country without rules.
Absolutely, absolutely. And finally, Salah, I mean, one of the things is that younger Somalis, younger people from northern Kenya, and are advocating, they're using different tools. They don't feel like their parents, where their citizenship was contingent. They feel like they're full citizen, and they're trying to realize the full, potential of what the new constitution provides, and also their identity. Can you talk about that? Because that tends to give me a lot of encouragement, where people are saying, you know what, Mimi in Kenya, despite coming from elsewhere.
I think the younger generation, the Facebook generation, the social media generation, maybe they don't feel the same way that the older generation feels, but you see, they're subject to the same obstacles. Okay, how you feel about being a citizen will always, be challenged by when you go and actually apply for the citizenship itself, or when you need a passport, or when you travel and you're coming back.
Yes.
How you're treated by your own country is how that will determine how you feel about it. So I think while the younger generation feel more encouraged, more it's called what they have been assimilated, or they have been.
Yes.
They have become real members, integrated into the country.
Yes.
Then I think something will wake them up. Something will always challenge that. What you sort of have acculturated yourself to the process. But when you come back from somewhere with your passport and somebody
reality hits you,
or you're treated differently, it hits you that, my God, what my father said was correct. So what happens is, I don't know where the issue is actually emanating from, because the policies themselves should have changed by now. So if the policies have changed, the outlook of those people who are there, who actually implement the policy, should also have changed. But you look at Nyaya House and the way they treat people from the north and people from the borders, is that, you have to actually go through the same process that was there before the new constitution. A new constitution says Kenyans are all the same, wherever they live. Even if you live on the border or you live in CBD, Nairobi, you are just Kenyan, and you should be treated the same. But what is happening? You look at also at other things. Now, these things are related to how we also treat other people, how we treat the other foreigners, how we treat visitors, how we treat different communities that actually come to Kenya for other purposes. For instance, people who have sought asylum in Kenya, the refugees, how have we treated them? They have been in camps for 20 years. Who stays in camps for 20 years? That's a lifetime. So people have to accept that, one, we need a population. We need human beings. There's no country without people. So we need people. If somebody has been born in Kenya, regardless of whether they were born from, people who are not from Kenya or non-citizens, I think there should be a mechanism this person can become a citizen. I'm talking about the refugees from Sudan, the refugees from Somalia, the ones from Eritrea. They are in Kenya. They have been in Kenya for now almost 30 years. Since 1993, Somali refugees have been in Dadaab, in Hagadera, and in Lodwar. So if up to today people are still in refugee camps, still being called aliens, it looks very weird, because do we actually want to spend resources on people whom we want to deport? You have spent all the resources on them. You have made them into, you have given them education. You have hosted them for 20 years. The constitution says that if somebody has stayed in Kenya legally for 7 years, you are entitled to
citizenship.
So I think there's a problem not only with the people from the north, but the way also we treat other Africans who come from neighboring countries who have sought asylum in this country. The way we treat them is the same way we treat the people of NFD. So these things become more and more problematic as we go along. If you see the way the country is violent now, the way people treat each other, the way the police and the way they treat people, actually protesters, and the way people are actually, the way things happen here is the way they used to happen in northern Kenya in the 1960s. The fellows who were there, who were leaders, are the ones who came, who are now, the fellows who were there who were foot soldiers, who cut their teeth in northern Kenya,
they are leaders.
Who are now leaders.
Leadership.
So what are they going to do? They're going to treat us the way they treated the NFD at that time. So I think we need to change a lot of things in this country. We need to recognize that we are all citizens of this country, and our interest is related. We are all interrelated. If some of us succeed, the others will also succeed. If we spend all our time, othering others, telling them that this tribe is from whatever, then I think we will not be able to develop the country. So we need to change the mentality. 60 years, 60 years is a long time. It's a very long time. We need to all of us heal from this wound of tribalism and discrimination.
No, thank you so much, Salah. That's a lot, and the insight is always welcomed. And I'm sure we'll come back to you at some point for other issues. And thank you, Salah, and have a lovely day.